Good afternoon. This is Daryl Peterson with Micromeasurements, and I wanted to take a few minutes and show you an application we thought of uh, recently. It came to mind. I was visiting the periodontist, and one of the things the periodontist said was I was brushing my teeth too hard because that can lead to some potential eroding of the gums, which could lead to some gum disease. So he said, you need to lighten up that pressure that you use brushing your teeth. And I thought, well, how could we measure that? How could we measure when we're putting too much pressure? So we decided to take an electric toothbrush, just like this one, and install a strain gauge over here on the back side of it, and we'll be able to measure how much bending force we're adding as we start to brush our teeth. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and install a strain gauge on the back side of the toothbrush. So again, we can measure that bending moment and that force and correlate it, to the amount of pressure that you're putting on your teeth. So I'm going to just take the end of this and take it off. And on this back side is where we're going to install the strain gauge. So components that I'm going to use for that, I'm going to start out degreasing, and I'm going to use the isopropyl alcohol to do that. We'll degrease this piece of plastic with some isopropyl. Then I'm going to take some 320 grit silicon carbide paper and do a light abrasion. And then I've got some conditioner, the Imprep conditioner, which is a very mild phosphoric acid. I'll use that for cleaning. And then also some Imprep neutralizer, which is an ammonia-based solution. We'll use that for making sure the pH is at the right level. And then last but not least, we'll take our handy-dandy M-Bond 200 and use the M-Bond 200 to put the gauge on. So let's go ahead and get started. So first step is going to be to take the solvent, the isopropyl alcohol, and I'm just going to take it and put it into a gauze pad like this. And I'll take it and I'll just wipe off really just both sides of this sort of end of the toothbrush. I'll just kind of clean it off. And it's made out of some type of plastic. I'm not exactly sure what it is. But whenever you're testing plastics, one of the things you want to do is try to make sure that it's not too shiny. Shiny means it doesn't have as much surface area. So we want to create some surface area to be able to promote adhesion of the strain gauge onto the surface. So the next step, what I'm going to do is take a small piece of some silicon carbide paper. I like to fold it back on itself just like that. And I'm just going to do some light abrading on the bonding side of this piece of plastic. So I'm going to take it and kind of hold it. And you can see I'm just going back and forth. You're not trying to really change the thickness of it. All you're really trying to do is promote adhesion. And by promoting adhesion, we're trying to take off some of that shine. Try to go a little slower so you can see it. Okay. And then now I'm going to take another one of these gauze pads with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and then just take that and wipe off after the abrasion. All right. And then once we've done that, now the next step is we're going to scrub this with a little bit of the conditioner and a little bit of the neutralizer. So the conditioner is a very mild phosphoric acid. It's used to help chemically etch metals mostly, but it can help you with cleaning up the surface on plastic too. So I'll just take a few drops, put it on the surface. What I also like to do, since it's round, I'll take a couple drops, put it on the tip of the cotton tip applicator, and just kind of scrub it back and forth. Just kind of scrub that whole area, get it nice and clean, and you'll notice really not much I'm picking up. I'll scrub it, put a nice little amount of pressure on it, throw that away, and take another gauze pad, and I'm going to fold it, and then just take it and kind of wipe off the excess. And wipe off the excess on the surface of the piece of paper. So that is conditioner. That's the mild phosphoric acid. The other thing I like to do is whenever you use it, I like to get back to a nice, clean, dry sheet of paper. So the next step is now I'm going to use the neutralizer. This is the ammonia-based solution. I'm going to take it and flood the area with it, and then take another cotton tip applicator and use that to scrub that surface as well. So I'll just scrub it back and forth. Just like so. And again, it comes up nice and clean. And I'll take another gauze pad and use it to dry up the excess. So I'll dry it up on the back side of that, and also dry it up a little bit on the piece of paper. And at this point, I want to be working on a clean, dry sheet of paper. So I'm going to take a couple of pieces off and just throw that away. And there's my little small toothbrush extension ready for bonding. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and just move it out of the way. And then I'm going to focus on the strain gauge that we're going to use for this project. And the strain gauge that we're going to use comes in this style of packaging. This is one of the smallest gauges we make. It's a 015 SLA. 015 SLA is a small linear gauge. It's actually got a 15 thousandths of an inch active length. If you look very closely, you'll see it right here. And this is a new style for this one. It's got the flex circuit. So the grid is here, and we've got this little flex circuit that comes down and transitions into a ribbon style cable. You can get this in different lengths. You can get it in a 3-foot length, or you can get it in a 9-foot length of wire. So this is the gauge that I'm going to be using. This one happens to be a 120 ohm resistance. We make this type of construction in various geometries and also in various sizes of gauges as well. But I've got a very small area, so that's why I chose this small one, the 015 SLA. Now to get it prepped and ready, what I'm going to do is locate a piece of glass. This glass is going to be my work surface, and what I'm going to do is take the piece of glass and clean it off. And the best way to do that is to take a couple of drops of the neutralizer, just put it on the piece of glass, and take a gauze pad and clean it off. And I'm also going to use gauze pad and neutralizer to clean off the tips of the tweezers that I'm going to be using to handle the strain gauge. All right, and now we're basically ready to take the strain gauge. We can just slide it out of the folder. Very important for you to take the gauge and orient it so that you've got the bonding side facing down and sort of the shiny side facing up. And what I like to do at this point is I'm just going to put a piece of tape over top of this gauge, and this is what's going to help me position the strain gauge onto the toothbrush. So I'm going to take a very small piece of gauge installation tape. It's going to be kind of hard to see there in the camera, but this is a gauge installation tape. It's a Mylar based gauge installation tape. And the piece that I'm going to be using is going to be quite a bit bigger than what I really need. I'm going to tear off a small piece of it. Put a little tab at the end of it. I was teaching a workshop recently, and I was in Texas, and when I showed them this little technique, they said, oh yeah, we do that. It's called a buddy tab. So I'm going to put little buddy tabs at the end of the tape, and then I'm going to take it and tape it down in place over top of the strain gauge. Just like that. And now this will allow me to pick the gauge up. I can actually bond the rest of the flex circuit separately. What I'm going to focus on now is getting this strain gauge installed onto the back side of this toothbrush. I'm going to take a few gauze pads and just kind of sit it on it, see if that'll keep it from moving around too much. Make sure I slide it so we can still see it. Now I'm going to take the tape, and notice how I pick it up at a shallow angle. And now I'm just going to transfer it over to the clean surface. I'm going to come down a little ways and just kind of wipe the tape down into place. I still got the flex. I'm going to decide what I'll do with that in a few minutes. Right now I'm going to focus on getting the strain gauge installed. And this is the idea that you never want to handle a strain gauge with your fingers. So we always use this tape method. So right now I've kind of got the gauge in place. I'm pretty happy with where it's going to be. So at this point, what I'm going to do is try to lift this tape and peel it back just a little bit to expose the bonding side of the strain gauge. And the great thing about this flex circuit is it will allow me to do that. So at this point, I'm going to locate my Mbond 200, the cyanoacrylate adhesive, and I'm also going to locate the catalyst, the blue catalyst that comes with it. We call it the Mbond 200 Catalyst C typically. Now to apply it, I'm going to open up the catalyst, and I'm just going to touch the back side of the strain gauge. So I put the vast majority of the catalyst right back in the bottle. You touch it on the inside part of the bottle about 10 or 12 times, and then just use a single wipe on the back side of the gauge. Literally that simple. And now we need to wait 60 seconds. So the 60-second wait time, what you're doing is allowing the catalyst to air dry. The catalyst is about 98% isopropyl alcohol, and that's just a carrier for the 2% that you're trying to leave behind. So once you apply the catalyst, you need to give it about a minute, and if you put it on and you can tell it's blue, you probably put it on a little bit too heavy, and you might need to wait a little bit longer. So right now we're waiting that 60 seconds, letting those solvents air dry. And at the same time, what I'm doing is I'm getting ready with my adhesive. I'm going to get a little gauze pad folded up like this that I'll use like a little squeegee. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put a drop of adhesive. Really, in this case, on something so small and it's round like this, I'm going to put the drop of adhesive basically about where the gauge is going to be installed. Sometimes you have to do that. On flat surfaces, you can kind of put it outside the area and then flow it underneath. On something like this, I'm worried if I put it back over here and start pushing it down, that it's all going to run off the sides and miss the gauge. So I'm going to make sure I put a drop of adhesive in the area where the gauge is going to be installed. So that's going to be my Mbond 200. And if you watch me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the tape back down ever so slightly. I still got the gauge pulled back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a drop of adhesive, if I can hold it, put a drop of adhesive right there along the edge where the gauge is going to be installed. Just like that. I'm going to have more than what I really need, but that's all right. I'm going to pull this back over, hold it, and then wipe that down into place. And go ahead and wipe it all the way through. And then I'm going to put my thumb on it, and I'm going to keep it on there a full 60 seconds. So now we're back to another 60 seconds. And that's the great thing about using Mbond 200. By the way, as soon as you use it, make sure you put the cap back on it because it likes to absorb moisture. And as it absorbs moisture, it decays it. So you want to go ahead and put the cap back on it. I got my thumb on it. I'm going to wait a full 60 seconds. Typically, what we recommend is 60 seconds of thumb pressure, and then you let it sit for 2 minutes, and then you can remove the gauge installation tape. So right now, we're waiting our 60 seconds. And a lot of customers will ask how hard do you have to push. If you're pushing hard enough that it hurts, you're pushing way too hard. All you're really trying to do is make sure everything is down nice and flat onto the surface to get that good intimate bond. All right, we've reached basically our 1 minute. So if you find that your have reached your 1 minute of time. Basically, at this point, what we like to do is let it sit for 2 more minutes, and then we can take it off. And you can see how the flex circuit was allowed to kind of bend back and forth, and this part of it's not even glued down at this point. I was debating about where I was going to put it, and I may not bond it at all in this particular case. I might just tape the wires down because I've got the gauge intimately bonded onto the surface along with probably about 1/2 of an inch of that flex circuit. So now we hurry up and wait again. Wait your 2 minutes. And at your 2 minute point, essentially we're ready to go ahead and take this, this tape and go ahead and remove the gauge installation tape off the strain gauge. So everything looks good so far. I'm going to go ahead and peel the tape off. I'm going to start it at one side and just kind of peel it directly back on itself, just like this. And once you get onto the gauge, peel the rest of it off. And now we've got our strain gauge with the wires installed on the end of this toothbrush. I'm going to bring the base of it back over. See if I can get that to go back in there correctly. There it goes. And I think what I'm going to do is take a piece of tape and just use a piece of tape to hold down the rest of the flex onto this toothbrush. Because you can do that. This flex circuit is flexible enough. It can maintain position. I'm just going to take some tape and tape that down into place. And once I do that, then basically we're ready to go ahead and check it. Check it and see how it responds. So I'm going to use another piece of the gauge installation tape. It works pretty good for doing this. If you're looking for a more long-term solution, we sell a variety of different types of tape. We've got an aluminum foil-based tape that's really good for this. It bonds it down very aggressively. That would be a good one to select. I think for what we're doing with this little electric toothbrush, I think this is going to be just fine. I think I just turned it on. Matter of fact, I know I just turned it on. See how I've got it? It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but now I've got that wire taped in place. Get it turned off. And let me show you a good view there. So I've got the wire taped down, a little bit of strain relief. I got a little bit of a strain relief bump. What I like to do too is put on an environmental coating, and that can help you as well. You could just brush a little bit over top of the gauge. You could brush it over top of the terminal and where the wires exit as well. I think for what we're going to do, I think this will work fine. So we can take it now and connect it into a strain gauge instrument and turn this thing on and then see how much pressure we're generating as we start to push down on it. Now, certainly if you were going to put it inside of your mouth or someone else's, you'd want to put an environmental coating over top of the strain gauges. What I would lean you towards is a good coating of either our M-Coat C protective coating. It's a silicone rubber. It's a Dow Corning product that we like to use for protecting strain gauges. Or you can also use a little bit of our M-Coat A. M-Coat A is it's a urethane protective coating, goes on nice and thin and forms like a thin, hard glue line over top of the gauges. I think for this one, I'm just going to brush a little bit of the M-Coat A over top of it. And then I think at that point, we're ready to start testing. I like to give the M-Coat A about 15 minutes. I'll just brush a little bit on it, just like that. And some of it's going to roll around to the bottom side, I'm sure. If you were concerned about that, you could mask it off or just wipe it off while it's still wet. So thank you. If you've been following this entire video, thank you for taking the time to watch this strain gauge installation on the electric toothbrush. We're going to let this M code A cure for a few minutes, and then we're going to take it and connect it to an instrument and see what kind of measurements we can get out of it. If you'd like to find out more about Micromeasurements products or any of the things that you've seen used in this video, please feel free to take a look at our website at www.micro-measurements.com. Thank you.